Opposition headquarters. A nursing home fire in Virginia kills 9. And Jim Bakker insists he is innocent. This is the CBS Morning News. Good morning, everyone. I'm Faith Daniels.
And I'm Charles Osgood. It is Friday, October the 6th. Panama's military ruler, Manuel Noriega, is cracking down on his political opponents in the wake of Tuesday's failed military coup. Soldiers stormed opposition headquarters last night. CBS newsman Scott Wallace was there, and he joins us now by telephone from Panama City. Scott, tell us what happened.
Well, the police raided the opposition headquarters last night, where Guillermo Endara, the opposition's presidential candidate in last May's annulled elections, was holding forth in the midst of a hunger strike. Endara was arrested, but diplomatic pressure later secured his release. Myself and some other journalists showed up there shortly after that. We were detained by the police, and they confiscated some film that some of the journalists had, and the policeman made off with our rented car, and it was not to be seen again. The car, that is.
Scott, at the beginning, the initial reaction of Noriega was to really go after the United States, blame the United States for this attempted coup. Is he still doing that? Is he still blaming the United States?
General Noriega is blaming the United States for the coup and for instigating the coup. He said that the rebellious officers were in the pay of the United States. He said this yesterday, and said he had proof, documents that he supposedly found in the desk drawers of the soldiers involved in the coup, linking them to the United States. So the United States continues to be, for the general, the main enemy here and the main force behind seeking to overthrow him here.
Okay, thank you very much, Scott. Scott Wallace in Panama City. White House officials are quoted this morning as admitting that the Bush administration team handled the Panama coup badly. The New York Times quotes senior administration officials as saying the U.S. military played a greater role than had previously been acknowledged. It's reported the White House Chief of Staff, John Sununu, has ordered a study of what went wrong.
2 more Westerners have been kidnapped in Lebanon. They're Swiss medical technicians working for the Red Cross. They were taken captive this morning by 2 men with guns in the port city of Sidon. There's been no claim of responsibility. That brings to 18 the number of Westerners held hostage in Lebanon. 8 of them are Americans. Soviet President Gorbachev flew today to East Berlin to help mark East Germany's 40th anniversary. But the communist celebration is clouded by the continuing exodus of refugees. As Gorbachev was preparing for his trip, another 600 East Germans were ending theirs. They arrived in West Germany on a special train from Poland after taking refuge in the West German embassy in Warsaw. They follow thousands of others who came by way of Czechoslovakia. Martha Teichner reports on their arrival.
At this moment, freedom became more than a word, a hope, a dream. It became a triumph hardly to be believed in its first dazzling hour by people who will remember always what they did at the little train station in Hof. I can't believe it. It can't be described. I don't understand it, she says. They drank in their freedom with greedy delight. They kissed and embraced. Or they cried, finally free to let out the emotions the ordeal of getting there had forced them to suppress. A stone has fallen from my heart, this woman says. I'm so relieved. It was a time for first tastes of the West. Bananas, unavailable in the East. Video games, no instructions needed. A bit of unashamed hucksterism. On a loudspeaker, the constant drone of names. The names of families looking for relatives and friends who might be on the trains. From first light to early afternoon, the trains rolled into Hof before moving on to refugee camps. Each time, that precious moment was repeated, until on the teeming platform, new arrivals found themselves celebrating their freedom privately in a public place. A child asks her mother, "Why are your eyes so wet?" Her answer, "Because I'm so happy." Martha Teichner, CBS News, Hof, West Germany.
Hungary's Communist Party opened a 3-day Congress in Budapest today. Reformers hope the meeting will end in the party's breakup into at least 2 competing factions. That would be considered a major step toward democracy. Conservatives, though, oppose any division of the party, which would be a first for any communist nation. Charlie?
A fire in a nursing home in Norfolk, Virginia has left 9 people dead and scores injured. Some of the dead were found trapped in smoke-filled rooms. But firefighters managed to evacuate more than 100 residents, with some of the patients carried down ladders to safety. More than 60 of the nursing home residents remain hospitalized this morning as investigators search for the cause of the fire. Jim Bakker's lawyers are preparing an appeal of Bakker's conviction for bilking his followers out of millions of dollars. Aaron Hayes reports on the climax of Bakker's fall from grace.
Jim Bakker could receive a sentence of up to 120 years in prison, but yesterday maintained his innocence and confidence.
I went into the courthouse several weeks ago telling you that my faith was in God, and I want to tell you again at this moment my faith is still in God.
Bakker's wife Tammy said the guilty verdict had not shaken them.
I have a great faith in the God I serve, and he's promised he will not let us down.
It was a quick decision. Just over 10 hours the jury deliberated, 9 times stopping to ask questions of the judge. Then jurors issued their simple verdict, guilty, on all 24 counts of fraud and conspiracy.
We went through all the evidence and everything, and we say we was guilty.
Prosecutors said the outcome proved to them the legal system works.
The verdict is gratifying because it reaffirms the values of honesty and fair play in American society.
Although he had indicated he would jail Jim Bakker immediately with a guilty verdict, Judge Robert Potter instead released him on a $250,000 bond until he's sentenced later this month. Aaron Hayes, CBS News, Charlotte, North Carolina.
Mark McEwen is in Fort Lauderdale this morning at the International Swimming Hall of Fame. He has a look at the weather for those of us who are not in the water this morning. How are you?
Fine.
Tough assignment.
Yeah, really, eat your heart out. I've got a Hawaiian shirt on, and can you see the legs? Because it's only like about 90 degrees outside down here. Just gorgeous. Behind me to my left, of course, one of the greatest divers of all time, Greg Louganis, and all kinds of things down here. We're going to talk about that later on in CBS this morning. And while I'm down here sweating, we might do a little bit of a weather this morning. And we're down here, by the way, for the International Outboard Grand Prix. I want to mention that as well. Now, take a look at the weather this morning for the rest of the world. The northeast is covered by clouds this morning, and a few showers are falling from these clouds. Generally clear skies are seen across the southern tier of the nation, while more clouds and rain are occurring over the central plains. Out west, skies are mostly clear. Now, later on today's weather will feature clouds and a few showers across eastern New England, while another sunny and warm day is on tap for the southeast and Florida. Thunderstorms and rain will fall from central Texas to Kentucky. Chilly temperatures will be felt in the upper Midwest, and out west, a mostly sunny day will be on tap. That's a quick look at the national forecast. I'm down here in air conditioning. Let's take a look at your weather. For Boston, morning showers, high of 70. Richmond, Virginia, mostly cloudy, high of 81. Chicago, partly sunny, high of 62. Tulsa, Oklahoma, showers, high of 66. And Las Vegas, mostly sunny today. The high will be 85 wonderful degrees. I want to tell you, it's a tough life when you get up and you say, should I go for the lotion or the suntan lotion? Someone's got to do it. Back to you.
Thank you, Mark.
Bye.
Well, the CBS Morning News continues. American Airlines considers a $7 billion buyout offer from Donald Trump.
And the Cubs' Mark Grace loosens up his bat to even the score against the Giants.
And off the ivy. Grace is content with that. 2-0 Cubs.
New York tycoon Donald Trump wants control of the nation's largest airline. Trump is offering $7.5 billion for AMR Corporation, the parent of American Airlines. In June, Trump bought Eastern's Northeast Shuttle operations and redubbed them the Trump Shuttle. This latest bid could lead to an expensive takeover battle. Analysts say that could hurt American and its customers.
This could be reflected in airfares and perhaps maybe just a higher cost of doing business for the air traveler.
AMR's board of directors will consider Trump's offer, but the company says shareholders would be best served by AMR staying independent.
Not too surprisingly, American Airlines was the most active stock on the big board yesterday, pushing all transportation issues sharply higher. And that, in turn, helped Wall Street rack up its third record-breaking day in a row. The closing bell yesterday, the Dow Industrials were up almost 2.5 points to close well above 2773. Since Monday, the Dow Industrials have climbed more than 80 points. Tokyo stock prices were sharply higher this morning. In European trading, the dollar's higher as well. In London, gold is at $363.70. That's up 30 cents. Silver is at $516. That's unchanged.
The Blue Jays will be playing catch-up tonight in Toronto, but last night in Chicago, the Cubs dusted themselves off and gave themselves a new chance at the glass slipper. Here's Jim Lampley.
In the National League Championship Series, the Chicago Cubs can be seen as the Cinderella team of the baseball playoffs. Yesterday, they proved that despite the Game 1 pounding from the San Francisco Giants, their clock had not yet struck midnight. In fact, the Cubs needed just one inning to secure a Game 2 victory. After Jerome Walton led off the game with a single, Ryne Sandberg tripled him home, and Giants starter Rick Russell was not long for the contest. It was an inning in which virtually everything was falling in for the Cubbies. All in all, 12 batters, 7 hits, 6 runs in the first, and Chicago continued to pour it on thick. In the sixth, Mark Grace doubled with the bases loaded. 9-2 Cubs. They won at 9-5. Now back to San Francisco.
I said before the series that I was expecting a slam-bang series, and so far it has been. It's been a lot of fun.
Game 3 of the American League Championship Series will be played tonight. Jimmy Key will start for the Toronto Blue Jays, Storm Davis for the Oakland A's, who lead the best-of-7 series 2-0. Elsewhere in baseball, the New York Mets announced that manager Davey Johnson will return as their skipper in 1990, while the Baltimore Orioles said they will retain the services of their manager, Frank Robinson, for next season also. The new hockey season began yesterday with the Stanley Cup champion Calgary Flames appearing in mid-season form against Detroit. Yuri Hrdini scored twice, once off his own deflection, and Soviet star Sergei Makarov, making his National Hockey League debut, scored a goal and had 2 assists as the Flames hung on to defeat the Red Wings. In football, Minnesota station WCCO reported yesterday that the Dallas Cowboys are negotiating to send running back Herschel Walker to the Vikings for Joey Browner and Darren Nelson. Others report that a trade was consummated, but Walker vetoed it, and that he may now be headed instead into the American Football Conference. I'm Jim Lampley, and that's our information trade in sports this morning.
Coming up on the CBS Morning News, President Bush laughs off his scheduled finger surgery.
And a landmark Paris cabaret, the Moulin Rouge, celebrates its 100th birthday.
On the CBS Morning News, here's a look at your weather. A few showers will dot eastern New England today, while the southeast will have another sunny and warm day. Rain and storms will dampen areas from central Texas northeast to Kentucky, while out west it will be generally sunny except for clouds over southern Montana.
Here are the day's top stories. Manuel Noriega is cracking down on his political opponents in Panama. Noriega's gunmen surrounded opposition headquarters yesterday, trapping a former presidential candidate inside. Later, soldiers raided the building, smashing windows and firing tear gas. Jim Bakker is free on $250,000 bond. The former evangelist says he'll appeal his conviction for bilking his PTL followers out of nearly $160 million.
President Bush heads to the hospital this afternoon for some surgery on one of his fingers. It's a minor procedure, and as Wyatt Andrews reports, the president is joking about it.
I will show you my scar afterward.
Presidential surgery is usually serious stuff, but the location of the president's cyst at the very tip of his right middle finger provoked merriment when a reporter asked if the president would hold his middle finger up.
Don't tempt me. Come on. It is this finger. This middle one. This finger is sometimes identified with a bad gesture.
The lump on the president's finger is called a mucoid cyst, a growth running between the end joint of the finger and the fingernail. The White House says Mr. Bush has had the cyst for 3 years, that it's not painful, but has become a nuisance.
This is a small, pea-sized swelling that occurs on the back of the fingers, just behind the fingernail, and is many cases is painless, and very infrequently is painful, but it usually grows in size and becomes troublesome if it is not treated.
Removing the cyst will require an hour's worth of surgery today at Walter Reed Hospital. Mr. Bush will be only under local anesthesia, meaning he will be awake during the operation. It's a procedure so simple, Mr. Bush seemed embarrassed by all the fuss.
Life goes on. I'll continue through this awesome burden to continue what I'm doing.
Because the surgery is routine and the anesthesia local, there is no talk here of invoking the 25th Amendment and having Vice President Quayle stand by. The only other risk, that of cancer, appears to be low, but doctors will perform a routine biopsy to confirm that the lump is benign.
Wyatt Andrews, CBS News, the White House.
The Senate will try today to salvage some of the catastrophic health care law that the House has voted to repeal. Both Democratic and Republican leaders are backing a plan that would keep most of the benefits but sharply reduce the controversial surtax. A tempest is stirring on the federal bench today. Chief Justice William Rehnquist has bypassed the policy-making body of the federal courts and sent directly to Congress a plan for speeding up executions of death row inmates. The New York Times reports that 14 federal judges, that's a majority of the group, have written Congress challenging Rehnquist's authority.
2 more bombs exploded last night in Bogota, Colombia. 2 people were injured, and a bank and a supermarket were damaged. There have been nearly 150 bombings, killing 10 people and injuring 165 since Colombia's drug crackdown began 7 weeks ago. U.S. officials say that huge seizures of cocaine recently, 36 tons this week alone, show that Colombia's drug war is having an effect. In New Orleans, the Coast Guard displayed 6 tons found on a boat in the Gulf. Officials say cocaine is being moved out of Colombia because it is no longer safe to store it there.
Mickey Mouse and Donald Duck found themselves cast as the ugly Americans yesterday. French demonstrators threw eggs and flour during a ceremony for a Disney park being constructed outside Paris. Disney executives fled the stage as French police moved in with clubs to break up the protest. The demonstrators say the government is supporting the Disney project with money that should go to help the poor. A famous French landmark is looking back on a century of high kicks and raised eyebrows. Bill McLaughlin reports on the cause of all the excitement.
It's been quite a year for kicking up one's heels in France. First, the 200th anniversary of the revolution. Now this. The can-can is 100 years old. Paris's rich and famous crowded the Moulin Rouge last night, that 19th century joint in Pigalle, to celebrate the can-can and the place where it was born. The Moulin Rouge and the dance it made famous has always had a special place in French hearts. This was never just show business. It was the watering hole that attracted the best, the brightest, the most beautiful and most outrageous, where Henri de Toulouse-Lautrec created an artistic legend during the Belle Epoque, immortalizing the dancers, pimps, and prostitutes who made up the Moulin Rouge crowd. The Moulin Rouge changed over the years. Chevalier, Piaf, and Mistinguett were stars, and the acts and costumes adapted to changing times and tastes. But that signature tune of Offenbach remained for all the world the musical symbol of total, unfettered exuberance. Not just a good time out, but the greatest of times. Today, the local neighborhood, Pigalle, has sunk into tacky squalor. The artists and writers, poets and politicians who flocked to the Moulin Rouge have been replaced with nervous Americans and grim-faced Japanese tourists. The acts have changed, too. Nowadays, there are far more young male dancers than any 19th century Frenchman would have tolerated. But the girls are still lovely. Their legs are still impossibly long, and when they change into the old costumes for the old dance, it's a reminder that some things just aren't worth changing. Some things remain, as the neon sign says, formidable. Bill McLaughlin, CBS News, London.
And this is the CBS Morning News for Friday, October the 6th.
The head of the federal hurricane relief effort is defending his agency. Critics say the Federal Emergency Management Agency has not provided help fast enough for the victims of Hurricane Hugo. But Associate Director Grant Peterson says FEMA took action as soon as it legally could, and its efforts are on target. In Iowa farm fields, more parts are being found from the DC-10 that crashed in Sioux City in July. Some of those parts are being turned up by farmers as they harvest their crops. Investigators are hoping the plane parts will give new clues to the cause of the engine explosion that brought down United Airlines Flight 232.
A faulty fuel valve is being blamed for a rocket launch failure in California. The rocket was the first in this country designed and built entirely with private funds. David Dow reports on the liftoff that didn't lift off.
T-minus 90 minutes, mark and counting.
The countdown at Vandenberg Air Force Base was a first for an unlikely competitor in America's newest space race. On the pad and in mission control rode the future of the American rocket company, AMROC, an aerospace midget competing in a giant's game for a piece of the commercial launch business.
The bottom line is that we think we can do it cheaper and better because we have a better idea.
Part of the idea is a new engine design, and part is the dream of the company's late president, George Koopman, of a fleet of inexpensive rockets that would one day become the Federal Express of commercial spaceflight.
We're not running fighter planes. We're not running Indy 500 race cars. We're running pickup trucks and delivery vans.
Koopman was killed in an auto accident a few weeks before his dream reached the launch pad. He boasted that his rocket was the first ever developed entirely with private funds. $15 million so far, pocket change in the aerospace world. When capital dried up, some employees worked for 3 weeks without pay. The dream captured the young and venturesome.
Go ahead.
25-year-old Julie Mueller counted down to the launch of what was now called the Koopman Express, the proud product of 5 years on a shoestring.
2, 1, 0.
But the Express never lifted off for its intended suborbital flight. A stuck valve apparently starved it of power.
Hang fire. Go to hang fire procedure.
Koopman's family and friends watched in shock as flames engulfed the rocket, a setback to strain even the philosophical.
Nothing good or great was ever accomplished easily or without setbacks.
You know, this happens, and you don't let this stop you. You go on.
The company insists a new rocket will rise from the ashes, that this was a dream delayed, not destroyed. David Dow, CBS News, Vandenberg Air Force Base.
A privately financed treasure hunt paid off big yesterday, and the investors literally got to see their ship come in. It was carrying the richest haul in U.S. history, more than $1 billion worth of gold recovered from a shipwreck 200 miles off South Carolina. The treasure hunters used high-tech subs and television to locate the luxury steamboat SS Central America. It sank in 1857 while carrying a fortune from the California gold rush fields to the banks in New York. You can bet that that gold is in the bank this morning.
That's the CBS Morning News for October 6th. It's Friday. I'm Faith Daniels.
And I'm Charles Osgood. Stay with us at the top of the hour for CBS This Morning with Kathleen Sullivan and Harrison.